We saw the drivers in those days at Pebble Beach as centaurs racing through the pine wood to do combat.
Pebble Beach came about because of the particular interest of Sterling Edwards, who was a leader in our little car fraternity in Northern California. Sterling knew Sam Morris quite well and was looking always for another place to have races other than on the airports that we'd been on. And he approached Sam Morris, entrepreneur, developer of the Pebble Beach Properties project, and Sam thought it was something he'd be interested in.
Sterling was a good friend of mine and also the family. My brother John Morse was then president of the company, briefly, and he liked the idea. It would bring people to the peninsula, which they needed then more than now, and so it began.
So Pebble Beach ran from 1950 to 1956. When you think about the fact the first race was 1950, only a year after the first sports car race, it really was the foundation of sports car racing on the West Coast.
They had great races in America, and being English was really quite annoying at times.
The attraction was first to race the cars anywhere they could, and obviously the attraction for people to watch these up-and-coming drivers as they were at the time.
You didn't have big trailers and mechanics standing all over the place. It was just kind of bring your own car and put it in a race and run it.
Well, there wasn't any official qualifying per se. People just ran there and they'd stick you in line someplace where they felt you might be competitive or more or less equal with the surrounding cars.
The main pit area was the corral for the stables, which were on the north end of the course. So you had to watch where you stepped when you were walking around in the pits.
I think it was 2.1 miles is what it was. And there are a lot of turns and a lot of trees. And it was basically an acceleration braking course. There were no big sweeping turns that you see in some of the courses now.
Pebble Beach course was surrounded by huge, what they call soft pine trees. And I can assure you that the only soft part is the first quarter of an inch of the tree. After that, it gets really hard. This course, you went the straightaway, which was not really straight. It had a little bit of a kink in it. And then you had to get stopped for a 90-degree right turn, which, maybe you could do at 30 miles an hour. I don't know if you could even do it that fast. Then you had a short straightaway to what they called the back straightaway, which was, again, laughingly called a straightaway, but it actually undulated up and down and made little weaving things. And no place where it was easy to pass.
It was probably the most challenging course in America at the time.
At that time, I don't think anybody was too much worried about the danger because none of them had ever run a road race before. They didn't know how fast the cars would go and what danger was involved.
Everybody's afraid to pass me because I was all over the race course, as Allards were prone to do. As you know, they had little tires and a lot of power, so they're going to be skidding all over the place. And it all boils down to a power-weight ratio.
But when Allard designed this car, he designed it for a flathead Mercury Ford V8, which stock was 85 horsepower. What he built and what he designed was perfectly fine for maybe a couple of hundred horsepower, but not for what we were running. And then one guy put a Jimmy Diesel in it, which, that was Basil Panzer, who was a reputed German count and was the only person that ever taught an Allard how to climb a tree. You look back, you think, well, that was a time I could have died, and this was a time I could have died, and you wonder how you ever get to be 30 years old.
There were some really exciting drivers back then, and it was a fun time and a very early time and very early period for racing.
One of my heroes was Phil Hill. He could handle just about any kind of car, and he would do well and generally win. Every time he came around, you get the crowd very excited.
Pebble Beach was wonderful. It was fantastic. It was stunning. It was a world apart from the rest of the world. It was something that doesn't exist really totally today. It was beautiful. We dressed as best we could. We behaved as well as we could. When I'd get drunk, I'd hide somewhere so nobody would see me. And pretty girls, oh boy. Yeah, it was wonderful.